Hello and welcome back, everyone. We are now moving on to the pitch competition, which is really a culmination of work throughout the year by the Pediatric Device Consortium. So I'm going to start with some thanks to Dr. Janine Furch, who you will meet in just a minute, and Dr. Kuhn Sheath, who are the assistant directors of the Pediatric Device Consortium here at Stanford, to Juliana Pearl and Dr. Sarah Greasley, who work with us as innovators in residence, entrepreneurs in residence, and many, many other things to help support the Pediatric Device Consortium. It is a consortium. We have a partnership with our colleagues at UCSF. We compete with them clinically, but when it comes to developing devices for kids, we work together very closely. So big thanks to the leadership there, to Dr. Michael Harrison, who is a mentor of mine, has been the PI on that grant, the FDA grant through UCSF for many years, to Dr. Shuvo Roy in bioengineering, Dr. Hanman Lee, and Usha Thetapath, who is the director of the program up there. So we do work throughout the year helping to support pediatric innovators, developing health technologies across devices, digital diagnostics. Again, we do that through our Innovators Forum, which everyone is welcome to join. Please look it up at pediatricdeviceconsortium.org. These weekly meetings at UCSF and monthly meetings here at Stanford bring together a community of innovators, industry experts, investors who really help support these projects and move them forward. And again, the results have been fantastic. We've really started seeing interest from right-sized venture investments in these projects. We've seen ultimately commercial successes, which is what is required to drive impact and to get these devices to patients. So it begins here with the pitch competition. A couple of thanks to our funders. So again, large grant from the FDA, the Pediatric Device Consortium grant, that supports pediatrics specifically, kids, health tech innovation. We also have the Cottrell Foundation and the Hooper family, who've allowed us to expand our support to both maternal and fetal projects as well, because that's really the entire population cared for by Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, UCSF Benioff Hospital, and Stanford Children's Health. Finally, I'm going to introduce the judges to you. We have an incredible group of people with really diverse perspectives who I think are going to offer some great comments on these projects and ultimately have the very difficult decision of determining the winners of this competition. So we have dueling chief operating officers for the first time. We have Rick Majan from Stanford Children's Health, and we have Jamie Phillips, chief operating officer for UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital. So fantastic to have representation from our hospital executives. We have Avi Roop, who's a venture investor, managing partner with RCT Ventures out of Tucson, Arizona. We have Chuka Esiobo, who's a venture investor at Define Ventures, a new group out of the Bay Area, relatively new firm out of the Bay Area focused on digital health. We have Denise Zarens, who is the chief technology officer for Fogarty Innovation, which many of you are familiar with, local incubator, accelerator, everything health tech development. We have Daniel Burnett, who's the founder and CEO of Theranova and a serial medical device entrepreneur. Theranova is a medical device incubator also here in the Bay Area. We have Tejal Desai, who's professor and chair of bioengineering and therapeutic sciences at UCSF. And finally, last but not least, we have an in-person judge, Paul Hooper, who is the CEO of Gigamon and brings the world of tech and experience in tech to our competition today. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Janine Furch, who's one of our neonatologists here at Stanford Children's Health. She's a successful physician entrepreneur herself, graduate of the biodesign program, and she's going to moderate this session. Thank you,
Thanks,
Janine.
James. Appreciate it. So we are thrilled to be here today. We have 10 amazing companies and groups that are going to be presenting to us. They're going to have 5 minutes to present, followed by 3 minutes of questions. Likely the questions will be directed to our online judges, so we won't be taking questions from in-person or the chat, but entertain those at a later time. And then finally, we have our first competition. So I'll introduce Dr. Urs Neighbor, and he is here with Zeit Medical. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Urs Neighbor. I'm the I'm a pediatric ICU doctor and also the co-founder of Site Medical, where we use machine learning to detect stroke with EEG. And I'm so thrilled to tell you guys today that we're using this technology now for pediatric patients, specifically for pediatric patients that are on mechanical cardiopulmonary support. So this is obviously a really high need population. 10 to 20% stroke risk is what's presented in the literature, and each pediatric stroke costs up to $200,000 in the first 5 years. For those of us who are not as comfortable or don't know as much about mechanical cardiopulmonary support, it's a technology that kind of brings the blood out of the body, pumps it through an oxygenator, and then brings the oxygenated blood back into the body. And the plastic and all the tubing and all the exposure that the blood has in this circuit obviously puts the blood in the situation where it needs to clot. It thinks it needs to clot, okay? And so a blood clot can form very easily and then travel back into the body and cause a stroke. So what do we do for these patients currently? What's the best we can do for them? We take them to the ICU. We monitor them there very closely. Every 1 hour, we check their neurologic status. But in someone who's sedated and paralyzed, that kind of amounts to checking their pupils every 1 hour. We also have NIRS, near-infrared spectroscopy, which kind of monitors the blood flow, but it really can't penetrate very deeply, so the brain perfusion is kind of not really monitored. And so it takes hours, sometimes days, before we even suspect a stroke, and then take into account the time that we need to huddle and think, is this, do we need to image this patient or not? And then transportation times. Well, the short answer is it takes forever, and nobody really gets meaningful treatment if they have a stroke in this kind of situation. And so this is where Site comes into play. The Neuracle AI has really shown great promise detecting stroke in the operating room. So much so that the FDA has awarded it FDA Breakthrough Device designation. And now we've actually received some kickoff funding from the PDC to look into pediatric patients. Thanks again for that. Neuracle AI was 87% sensitive detecting a stroke without false positives. And it integrates easily into existing EEG systems in the ICU. Going forward, we'll then provide also an adjustable headband that can work with multiple head sizes, even the smaller head sizes. So the value proposition is here that we can skip those really long known delays that lead to no patient getting treatment and really allowing them to get those effective treatment options that exist. And with the kickoff funds, we've actually already done so much. We've gotten our IRB, we've hired an internal research coordinator. We have identified cases where EEG was in place when the patient had a stroke. And so we're super thrilled. We're right now extracting that data. And then with your help, we're hoping to not only retrospectively analyze the data, but actually take this forward in a prospective clinical study and identify the accuracy of our algorithm. And there is a very clear path to regulatory approval in 2023. So obviously, we didn't start with pediatric as a focus. The market is relatively small, and initially, we focused on the adult world. But now, starting this year, we've dedicated resources, and we're currently in the data extraction phase, followed by the retrospective pilot study, and then following that, hopefully, with a prospective study. There's about 80 pediatric ECMO centers, which is our first target. We'll provide this as a volume-based annual licensing agreement. The algorithm will integrate easily into existing EEG systems, so there's a very low bar to integration. There's effectively no competition and a very clear regulatory path. There are some NTAP reimbursement codes that exist and have been very successful for AI integration in the inpatient setting, and we have obviously a very clear IP strategy. I'm not doing this alone. Orestes is my co-founder, and we have a ton of really great people that pour their heart and soul into making this happen. We also have some fantastic clinical collaborators here at Stanford who are gung-ho about making this a piece of reality. And just to kind of sum it up here, a couple of pieces. We're already pretty far in, and this is a high-need market. Everybody's aligned. And I just really think this is what we need. Thank you.
I'll take it. Thanks so much. So
So if you wouldn't mind, let me start off with the first question. Great presentation, thank you. Two questions. One is, give me a little bit more detail behind how you extract the information from the EEG, you then feed it into a cloud, you run the AI, and then you signal an alert back. Can you give me just one more sentence about how that all works?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the inpatient setting, it's a little different than what our current process is, where it actually feeds into the cloud. In the inpatient setting, we can have an internal server in the hospital system, which kind of prevents sort of having to go through the firewall and back. So we'll have an internal server that will, get the feed from the EEG acquisition system, analyze it in real time, and then spit back an alert. And that alert can be hooked up to your Philips monitor, or it can be, forwarded to a spoke messaging system or any kind of paging system that will then trigger kind of an alert to the physician or provider.
Okay, thank you. And then final question from me was, as the algorithm improved, do you see the 80%, 87% sensitivity? Do you see that creeping towards the 90s? Do you see that being something you iterate? The more data you get, the better the AI system's going to be?
Yeah, I wish I could give you an answer to that. I think, this data is kind of really hard to come by. Just to kind of give you an understanding, the algorithm, we had to sift through 5,000 or more cases to get to a relatively small data set in the hundreds that we used to develop the algorithm and validate it. And so we're just in that crucial phase where we then kind of go forward and we'll get additional data in. And so what we're currently doing in the pediatric, with the pediatric data, is actually our first data set from this new ICU setting. So we're hoping to improve it in that setting, and every additional case will make it better.
So we'll turn to our online.
I have one point of clarification and one question. You can hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so point of clarification, I have some insight into Forest Medical Devices, which is a ambulance-based cath dry electrode system. That's a large vessel occlusion versus small vessel occlusion decision. Of note, I don't know exactly what number they settled on with the FDA, but they were above 90. I think they were closer to 95 on sensitivity and specificity, but we could find that out. Another point of clarification is, we have some insight into Zeto, which is another dry electrode company. It's kind of like a Holter monitor, long-term device that's gathering a lot of the EEG information. And so, we've met before, and restless, but we could connect and try to maybe get some access to those data sets, because both Forest and Zeto are building large EEG data sets as well. That'd be good for training. And then my real question is I understand you're going to be doing a small vessel occlusion type of algorithm. What's different about yours? Maybe tell me why you couldn't do it with something like a dry electrode on the scalp system. Do you need to gather more data points, or what's unique about your system?
No, I think that's actually not the acquisition system. That is your question, Avi. What sets us apart from Forest Devices, and
why do you? I guess I'll be direct. Why do you need to exist? Understanding that there are other ways to gather EEG information. You need to exist because you're going to have the algorithm. But I guess do you need maybe I'm inferring that you need a bespoke, skin-based acquisition system, and that's probably from some of your old designs that I saw a long time ago. So maybe you don't need that. Maybe it's all the algorithm. Is that a fair way to put it?
What we need, Avi, is we need a form of monitoring, right? Forest Devices is an ambulance-based system that you put on point of care to detect a stroke, and it doesn't. If you had a stroke, an old stroke, it leaves a scar in that area of your brain, right? Those neurons won't fire normal EEG signals. So now you go into your ambulance and you put on your point of care. You don't know what you're measuring. Is that a old stroke, or is it a new stroke, or So that's.
I think they're just measuring a decrease in hemispherical activity. I think that's probably all they're doing.
So then you don't know. Is it something that you have to act upon or not, right? So our thing is something comfortable that can be worn, that there currently is no solution for that in the ICU, and it's something that will detect it when it happens, not afterwards when someone thinks, oh, maybe this patient has a stroke, right? At that point, it's already hours or days too late. We want to detect it when it happens, because there are the treatment options that we can use to help these patients.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
So I know we have so many judges at home, so just for a point of clarification, I'll turn to Paul Hooper to see if he has questions on the floor, and then I'll turn to our online judges as well. We have our second presentation up. No worries. It's great. It's hard to see everybody and know what's going on here, so I just wanted to clarify. But we have our second presentation from UCSF. We have Cymox AP ready to present.
Is there a way to get this on the presenter view or to switch the screens at all or no? Okay, all right. Hi everyone, my name is David Blavelt and I'm a pediatric critical care physician at UCSF. And I'm here to talk to you today about our device, which we call the Cymox Artificial Placenta, or Cymox AP. So the Cymox AP is a device that's designed to treat extreme prematurity, specifically those infants that are born between 20 and 22 weeks of gestation. So I work in the ICU and I take care of patients like Caleb here, who was born at 23 weeks of gestation. And so Caleb was very lucky to survive, but most patients who are born at 22 weeks and below really have no options for care. And there's about 7,000 of these patients that are born every year. And the reason is due to their prematurity and their poor outcomes due to their immature lungs. And so the standard of care for any premature patient is mechanical ventilation. That's what Caleb got. And the problem is that forcing air into the lungs under pressure is extremely harmful to the premature lungs. And so Caleb was lucky to survive with this mechanical ventilation. However, most patients born at 22 weeks and below really just have no options and don't survive. And so in order to make a difference in these patients' lives and to help them, we need an option that's better than mechanical ventilation. And so the Cymox AP is a device that performs gas exchange outside of the body instead of using the lungs for gas exchange. And so blood is actually pumped by the infant's heart out the umbilical arteries to the device, where oxygen diffuses across a membrane into the blood, and then the oxygenated blood is returned to the body via the umbilical veins, along with medications and nutrition. And so by sparing the lungs of harmful mechanical ventilation, we're actually able to promote infant survival and normal lung development. And so the core of this technology is the patented silicon-based semi-permeable membrane shown here. And so this membrane is composed of a rigid silicon backbone, and then it is etched with microscopic pores and then coated with a 5-micron layer of polymer, which allows free gas diffusion but prevents leakage of blood out of the blood channel. And so we did some early proof of concept studies that showed that our devices can provide up to 10 times more gas exchange per surface area relative to existing hollow fiber membranes. And with that, we were able to secure non-dilutive funding to build a clinical scale device, which is shown here. And so this device that we built and tested a couple of these in pigs and showed enough gas flux to support a 20-week infant. But the key to building a successful artificial placenta device is hemocompatibility. And what I mean by that is specifically the ability to operate clot-free without anticoagulation. So extremely premature infants are especially prone to complications due to brain hemorrhage or bleeding within the brain. And so existing hollow fiber devices which require anticoagulation are fundamentally unsafe to use in these patients. And if you look at the actual devices of hollow fibers, it's easy to see how the blood flows heterogeneously around the fibers, which is not good for hemocompatibility. But we believe that the Cymox can eliminate anticoagulation by featuring a laminar blood flow path and also reducing the surface area due to its improved efficiency. However, we need to prove in animals that our device has superior hemocompatibility. And so with this study, this key preclinical study, we propose testing the Cymox for 10 days in a pig, or in several pigs, to prove that it can be used without anticoagulation. And the 10 days is based on the device's intended duration of use. And so the anticipated cost of this study will be $100,000, and the results will tell us whether we can use this device safely without anticoagulation. So looking at our market, we based our market size or market analysis on analogous ECMO oxygenators, which we use in full-term infants, pediatrics, and adults. And so we pay about $20,000 for a single-use oxygenator, and that is used for about 1 to 2 weeks for ECMO. But our device we will need for about 10 to 12 weeks due to the prematurity. And so because of that, with an intended duration of use of 10 days, that's actually 8 devices per patient, which is about $160,000 per patient. 7,000 patients a year is $1 billion market. This doesn't include the multiple follow-on markets for the 23 to 32 week infants, are especially a natural follow-on market. They would use a similar size device. They also suffer from problems with mechanical ventilation and also cannot get anticoagulation due to brain bleeding. Also ECMO, which is expanded in its use due to COVID-19 and cardiac surgery. ECMO oxygenators are typically approved via the 510K pathway. We also meet criteria for HD as well as compassionate use, and we'll use this to help map our path to first in human and FDA approval. And so with that, I will summarize. With the Cymox AP, we're trying to offer a potential treatment option for patients who otherwise would die, and we will hope to use this clinical scale or this preclinical study to prove that our device can be used in vivo without anticoagulation. So with that, I will thank you, and I hope that you will join us in our efforts to provide an option for these infants who otherwise have no options.
Thank you so much.
So very compelling. Thank you for the presentation. In your write-up, well, the notes you said that you can see a possible future extension here where you could turn this into a almost permanently worn artificial lung. Do you see that? I mean, that's an expansion of technology. Do you see that as being a diversification from where you are?
Yeah, so really it's just a matter of scaling to the appropriate size patient. So the easiest would be to scale to the same size patients, the 23 to 32 weekers. And then beyond that, it's really just a matter of surface area and a matter of how much blood flow you can accommodate. So yes, you can support full-term infants, pediatrics, and adults. You just have to make the device bigger.
And we'll turn to our online judges if we can display them. And if anyone has questions. Yep.
I mean, really more of a comment. I think this is a phenomenal undertaking. And my dream for these sorts of technology is something that men could wear with an A-line and a V-line. And you could, grow your own kid in a backpack that you wear on for 9 months. Totally support it.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the dream with these microfluidic type oxygenators, of which we are one. And I think the main difference between the Cymox and other microfluidics is that we're really focused on the hemocompatibility portion of it, which really has been a major barrier and something that nobody has been able to solve to date.
And can you do any other small scale tests in other rabbit models or kind of more standard, thrombogenicity, pyrogenicity type tests that regular medical devices go through to kind of get a read on it as opposed to taking the big study first? Or
we have done acute studies mostly for oxygen transfer. Although those studies we've conducted with really minimal anticoagulation, we give a single dose of heparin at the start of the study and then don't continue it. And the devices haven't clotted over 4 to 6 hours. So we haven't done the rigorous hemocompatibility studies, but that will be part of this proposal.
Yeah, and just a note, I'm also on the board of a couple. Yeah, we've got a couple other points. If you want to follow me later, there's people in the aneurysm world working on lots of cool coatings to get away from anticoagulation as well in photoburgers.
Well, we really appreciate that, Avi. We have about time for one more question from our online judges.
This is Denise Aarons. Can you explain to me a little bit about what you expect for a clinical trial in terms of looking at outcomes in these patients?
Yeah, I think in terms of like a first-in-human study, I think we would probably target those patients right at the edge of viability where you really can't, where they would not be a candidate for mechanical ventilation, which would be the traditional treatment. And then what you'd be looking for is really survival, to be honest, is inherently valuable because these patients currently aren't even resuscitated in the birth room. And then what you'd also be looking for is a decrease so I have a slide briefly on bronchopulmonary dysplasia and sort of the cost of this. I showed the picture of Caleb initially, who did survive, but he's actually, he's heavily medicalized. He has a tracheostomy. He's dependent on 24 hours mechanical ventilation, and that's due to this bronchopulmonary dysplasia. And so what we'd be looking for is reducing this incidence of this as well.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So next up, we're truly pleased to have a maternal company here today. So Radiant Oximetry and their device, Lumira. And then there you go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Neil Ray. I'm a board-certified pediatric anesthesiologist, CEO and founder of Radiant Oximetry, and our mission is to improve outcomes for mothers and babies during childbirth by developing a better fetal monitor. And the reason why we need to develop a better fetal monitor is current fetal heart rate monitoring technology has an accuracy of a coin toss in predicting fetal distress. This technology, known as fetal heart rate monitoring, is over 50 years old. There's been zero innovation in the space. It's difficult to interpret, and it's characterized by an accuracy of a coin toss. This leads to a low sensitivity and a low specificity. So what does that mean? Low specificity is a situation that leads to false positives. This is a situation where we think the baby's in trouble, but they're actually not. So as clinicians, we're compelled to do an unnecessary C-section. While C-sections can be life-saving to mom and baby, when they're performed unnecessarily, they add morbidity and mortality to both mom and baby and drive up healthcare costs. On the flip side, we have low sensitivity with fetal heart rate monitoring. This is a situation where we have false negatives. A baby that's in trouble but fails to get identified, this baby ends up developing hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, brain damage, and this situation where everyone's devastated. And we have a current situation where newborn birth injury hasn't changed in the last 40 years, despite the introduction of fetal heart rate monitoring. So what we're doing at Radiant Oximetry is developing a new type of fetal monitor, one that doesn't look at the baby's heart rate, but rather the baby's oxygen saturation. Because we all know in healthcare, oxygen saturation is a much better predictor of distress than changes in the heart rate. And the way we do that is by using the principles of pulse oximetry to do a color analysis of the baby's blood, but we're able to do it non-invasively through the maternal abdomen. We have 10 issued patents to date covering system, method, and device claims from 5 families of patent applications. We also have breakthrough status from the FDA for expedited market entry, and we believe that our preclinical results have been compelling to date. We used a fetal sheep model, or pregnant sheep model, as our preclinical model, and we've demonstrated a sensitivity of 99% and a specificity of 95%, protecting the baby at risk for hypoxic distress. Our vision is if we can improve sensitivity by 10%, we could reduce false negatives by 10% and potentially reduce brain damaged babies by 10%. On the flip side, if we could double specificity, we could reduce false positives by 50% and reduce unnecessary emergency C-sections by 50%. Our vision is to be a disposable sensor that tucks into existing fetal monitoring platforms, clinical workflows, and reimbursement codes. We don't want to replace fetal heart rate monitors, we want to complement them. We know that these monitors are expensive and they're good screening tools, but they're poor diagnostics, and we want to be the missing diagnostic in labor and delivery. We've surveyed hospital purchasers about what they would be willing to pay for the use of our technology, and the price point that they've come up with is $400 per disposable sensor. At scale, this gives us a gross margin of 90%, and our technology is treated as a supply. It could potentially avoid value analysis committees, and it could slip into existing DRGs for reimbursement in labor and delivery. The indication for use that we're going after is that we can diagnose fetal hypoxia during a Category 2 fetal heart rate tracing. What's that? Well, a fetal heart rate tracing Category 2, a Category 1 tracing is normal. That happens 15% of the time. Category 3 tracing is ominous, requiring immediate intervention, and that happens 5% of the time. And Category 2 tracing is where obstetricians struggle to figure out if the baby's in trouble or not. This happens over 80% of the time. This gives us a serviceable market of $1.2 billion here in the US, and globally, potentially a $10 billion market. We've been successful to date with venture capital fundraising. We've raised about $12 million and have over $2 million in grants from the NIH and NSF. The big goal for this year is to complete a 30-patient pilot study, and then we'll use that data to raise a Series B. We'll use the proceeds from the Series B to do commercial product development, 600 patient pivotal study, and apply for PMA submission. Thing I'm most proud of is the team we assembled to tackle this difficult situation. Our team has over 100 years experience in pulse oximetry, women's health, and pediatric medicine. Look forward to answering your questions, and thank you for your interest in radiant oximetry.
Thanks so much. Okay, we're going to our online judges for a question.
But just for information, just a quick comment. I think this is great. I love the way you're approaching this market differently. As a non-clinician, I've always been befuddled why in this area, which affects so many people, right? There are 140 million births globally a year, and the technology for this has not changed, as you said, in 50 years, and that never has made sense to me. So I just want to commend you on tackling the problem with the direction that you got this in.
Thank you.
Good. Avi Rup here. I think your survey of purchasers is sounds like an accurate number they would come back with. I would push you to go a lot higher on your pricing to start with, and then you can always discount it down to a number they'd agree to. But this is, if you take a step back and say, one way to look at it is, okay, it's $400 times 3 million live births. So that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, what is it worth to eliminate the fear and unconstrained risk that's burdened on the neonatologist? And I think that's worth a lot more than $400. But obviously it's going to be a balance. But I guess my main point is I think 400 is probably accurate at the end of the day, but I think probably have some significant upside on the pricing.
Bobby, that's right. You need to invest in our Series B and come on our board to give us some guidance.
Yeah, that's what I'll just keep saying that over and over again. No, this is fantastic stuff.
So on the question of my two colleagues there, single-use device?
That's correct. So we'll have two versions. We'll have a single-use disposable for the developed world, and then a reusable that can be repurposed in the developing world.
Got it. Does it require some sort of capital equipment to read the sensor?
Yeah, so we do need to piggyback on existing fetal heart rate monitors, because the way we separate the signal coming from the mom and the baby is by looking at the heart rates. So we need to know the heart rate inputs for mom and baby, and existing fetal heart rate monitors have those inputs that we use to separate out the signal.
And do you have a piece of equipment that does all this signal analysis and signal separation, correct?
That's correct.
And is that going to be capital equipment that'll go through the value analysis committee?
No, it's low cost. It can be done through a smart cable or an OEM module that plugs into the back of existing fetal heart rate monitors. Less than $500.
Time for one quick question.
You in the audience?
There aren't any more questions. We'll move on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I'll take these. And we're all learning as we go, so if our judges can just announce who they are when they're talking, that would be really helpful, because we can't actually see you on the screen, and I think that would help our presenters as well. So next up, we have Vortech Shunt, a fetal device company.
Thank you, Janine. I'm really excited to talk to you guys today about the Vortech Shunt. I'm Kun Sheth. I'm a pediatric urologist here at Stanford. And our team consists of a collaboration of surgeons and engineers who have joined us today as well. So the Vortech Shunt has addressed a clinical need in urinary tract anomalies. And I wanted to start by showing you guys a family's experience just to give some perspective on the need.
He received 5 separate shunt placement surgeries in order to save his life. And because of the shunt, we believe that that is the reason Caleb is here today and has life. And we are really excited to hear about this new design and how it can help so many other kids just like Caleb.
This is a patient, Caleb, who was actually treated in utero by one of our team members, Dr. Blumenfeld, here at Stanford. And just to give a little bit of background first about lower urinary tract obstruction, or LUDO as we call it, it occurs in about 1 in 2,000 pregnancies and has a high mortality associated, up to 80%, due to the significant pulmonary morbidity as well as the renal morbidity. vesicoamniotic shunts can be placed to allow the fetal urine that's obstructed to pass into the amniotic space and increase the amniotic fluid. And then after that amniotic fluid increases, it allows for less compression on the lungs and also allows swallowing of the fluid by the lungs to allow development. However, the benefit on actual GU system, on the bladder and the kidneys is still vastly unknown. And because of the risk profile associated, we're only placing these in the most severe ludo cases. As I had mentioned, the existing technologies do have significant risks. They were created in the 1980s. There's two shunts, the Rocket and the Harrison shunt. And the shunt dislodgement rates are really high, about 50 to 80%. And these necessitate multiple procedures, up to 4 to 5, as our patient Caleb had while in utero. Each one of these procedures harbors a significant risk to the mother and the baby. And as we've been talking and learning about today, with preterm labor and increased prematurity and NICU costs, we see a significant cost burden just from the initial NICU costs, which amount to about $100,000 per patient for those that have shunts placed. And then the long-term renal morbidity is vastly more prominent as the years go by, because about 50% of patients with severe ludo end up having end-stage renal disease in the first few years of life. And another 30% of the ones with mild and moderate ludo progress to having end-stage renal disease by adolescence. So clearly there's a need for a better shunt and a better option. And as such, we've developed the Vortech Shunt. And I have a little model here, but it's probably hard to see because of the small size. But essentially, we have nitinol anchors on both the bladder and the amniotic side of the shunt that really allow for conformability and better anchoring, as well as a coil reinforced conduit that allows for expansion as the baby grows, because these are usually placed at about 20 weeks gestation, and the baby will grow substantially since that time. And then the last addition is this one-way valve that we have that allows for bladder cycling, so that the urine doesn't just immediately go into the amniotic space, but it allows the bladder to fill and then have a normal contraction so that it can also develop through the in utero time period. Here we have on our ex vivo porcine model an ultrasound-guided placement of the shunt through a 7 French deployment mechanism. The current ones use the same size, 6 to 9 French. And it's really easy, as you can see, to visualize the shunt on the ultrasound, as well as the tactile feedback from these anchors that help guide the placement more easily. Overall, the key benefits of improved fixation, high echogenicity, kink resistance, and expandability, and the physiologic bladder emptying will allow for this shunt to really help all ludo patients, not just the most severe cases. And we've presented this work to a lot of fetal leaders worldwide, and they've shown a great enthusiasm for the shunt, which we feel will help with market buy-in in this kind of a niche market. However, we also have a strong value proposition from the fact that the improvement in renal morbidity does amount to about $680 million of cost savings per 1,000 patients in the US annually. And in addition, with the key benefits of the Vortech Shunt, we can allow for value-based pricing and a price premium and expand the market not just to ludo shunts, but also to other fetal conditions in the lung for which shunts are currently used. So together that gives us about a $10 million market in the US, but we anticipate spreading outside the US as well. Considering the small market, we have discussed acquisition and licensing, and we've approached Cook Medical, who currently produces the Harrison shunt, with, and they've shown a lot of enthusiasm and excitement about our device, and so that is definitely a consideration in our exit strategy. Regulatory-wise, the current shunts that are available on the market both had an HD designation in 1996 and 1997 when these devices were first allowed to have HD designation. And so we've talked to them and we'll collaborate with early PMA versus HD designation. And our proposed use of funding will be towards manufacturing and towards animal studies in the near future.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, to our online judges. Yep.
Yep, Avi Roop with RCT. So is this, just to make sure I understand, it's like an Amplatz or PFO closure device with a through hole and a one-way valve? Is that?
Yes, yeah, that's actually.
Two kind of baskets on either side. They're in between, right?
Yes,
that. So yeah, and what do you think your cost of goods will be? I bet it's got to be under $100, probably.
Yeah, that's exactly what we think. And so the premium pricing really is based on the value proposition.
Absolutely. And what other sort of, organ to organ, the organ to organ applications? I mean, I feel like there might be a lot of applications to this sort of shunting technology that, if you've laid down the IP and you've got the manufacturing process set up, you might be able to spin out multiple licenses to multiple applications. You could just be a licensing house and maintain the IP. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Regulatory. Very good.
No, that's actually what we've been thinking about. And one of the other adult uses or non-pediatric fetal uses that will introduce a bigger market is pancreatic pseudocysts, which are currently have the same problems. They're placed interluminally by GI. And so we've seen that as a great opportunity for our shunt. And it wouldn't necessarily need a valve, but it would allow for that same drainage. So we've been really careful with our IP to allow drainage from one cavity to another and part of our claims.
Thank you for the presentation. One quick question. Clarify the numbers for me. So 3.6 million births in the US per year, 1 in 2,000 is Luto, so 1,800 patients with Luto. And if I saw the numbers that you had on the write-up, you said only 120 shunts are placed per year. So only 7% of patients are positively impacted by one of the potentially limited existing shunts exist on the market today. So there's 93% of patients go untreated and wind up with the long-term effects associated with non-treatment.
So they do wind up with long-term effects. The issue right now is that there is a high mortality still, but it's about weighing the risks and pros and cons and when the time is to intervene. And there are patients, including actually someone that we've been talking to patients that end up deciding to terminate pregnancy in some of these severe cases because of the high complication rate with placing shunts. And because of the high complication rate, we're only placing them in the really severe cases. But I see, as a urologist, I see a lot of the renal morbidity, a lot of the bladder morbidity that kind of proceeds through all of life afterwards.
We have time for one more online question.
I guess I'll chime in. This is Denise Aaron from Fogarty. I'd like to further sort of talk about your cost of goods. $100 seems really low to me. And I'm curious, does it have a separate delivery system, and with the nitinol and everything, how do you really foresee a cost of goods as low as $100 all in with labor and sterilization and the like?
We've kind of modeled this from actually when we first designed the Vortech Shunt, we did use that PFO device to help with kind of off the shelf materials, the deployment, and so that's where we are thinking about the cost of goods. The deployment mechanism is very similar to what is currently produced with the Rocket Shunt and the Harrison Shunt, and so that similar trocar mechanism that they are given with can be used for this as well, and so that's why we feel the cost will be fairly low.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So sticking along the same lines of kidneys and the urinary tract system, we have Diatro up next.
Excellent, thank you.
Share a clicker.
Oh, great. Good morning, and thank you, everybody. I'm excited to present our work on the Diatro Kidney Keeper, which is a medical device that's aimed at improving transplant outcomes and increasing the longevity of pediatric kidney transplants. Our team is actually made up of engineers and physicians at UCSF and Stanford and came out of the Stanford Biodesign Fellowship this past year. I want you to take a moment and imagine yourself as the parent of a child with kidney failure. After a long year on dialysis, daily sessions, they finally get a kidney transplant, and you're excited and you're relieved, and then when they wake up from the surgery, you're told that their kidney isn't working. This is devastating to patients, to their parents, to the surgeons involved, and it's not all that uncommon. Delayed graft function is the name of this condition. It happens in 1 out of 4 pediatric patients, and it's devastating to everyone involved. It lasts for about a month on average. Some people end up going on to lose their kidney. You have higher rates of rejection, longer hospitalizations, but the big problem is that the kidneys fail 3 to 5 years early, and especially in the pediatric population, these are patients who end up going to 3 or 4 different kidneys throughout their lifetime. They go back on dialysis and they die earlier. Now, we wanted to do something about this. And we realized that we're spending a lot of effort, money, and resources on reducing the amount of time it takes to procure, transport, and implant a kidney. But we should be focused on the more important factor, which is temperature. So if you look at the temperature curve of a kidney from start to finish, kidneys basically stay healthy when they're kept cold. And we're doing a really good job of that during the transport process. But while we're sewing them into the recipient, they're warming up precariously. And this injury actually is 6 times higher and leads to DGF. So we wanted to do something about this. We spoke with surgeons and transplant specialists and preservation specialists all across the country, and we came up with the Kidney Keeper. This is our Kidney Keeper here. It's a medical device that's aimed at preventing warming injury, fighting warming injury that's occurring during the transplant surgery. It's placed on top of the kidney. It has a phase change gel that keeps that kidney at 4 degrees, and it has some features that were developed by surgeons in order to make the surgery easier. It's small, it doesn't get in the way, it has a temperature sensor and retractor. This is an animation of it in action. And it works. So in our benchtop testing, we've actually been able to keep pig kidneys cold for over an hour using the Kidney Keeper. So the big question, though, is would surgeons want to use this? So we turned to the ASTS, and we found that 97% of surgeons would use this device if it was available. 80% said they would actually use higher risk organs if the Kidney Keeper was available, which means we can save organs that are currently being thrown away. But this was my favorite response. I would use this in all my transplants just to take the stress out of sewing against the clock. Now, there's 1,000 pediatric kidney transplants that are done every year. So development of this device has to run in conjunction with the adult version in order to make it a reality. We're going to share our safety and usability studies. It's harder to make a pediatric-focused device because of the size and how small kids are. We've run a Markov model looking at the savings, and at a minimum, per child, per kidney, we're saving at least $12,000. This all adds up in the entire picture to approximately $1.2 billion in savings for every year's cohort of recipients. We'll save at least 2,700 kidneys, and we've been working with several teams in order to figure out our pricing. Our ASP is $6,000 currently, and that's based on numerous factors, but it's a lot cheaper than the current technology that's used during the transport space. This gives us a TAM of $286 million. And you've probably seen in the New York Times, as the world moves towards pig transplants in humans, xenotransplantation, and robotics, the Kidney Keeper is actually way more important. We'll also plan to use our platform technology on different organs, and we anticipate an entire kidney, heart, liver, and lung keeper series. Now, our 7-year top-down market model shows approximately $111 million in revenue for kidney alone at 30% adoption. We'll follow a traditional 510(k) pathway. It's considered a Class 2 device with predicates in place. Here's our IP status, and we've actually already been approached after a year by 2 different companies interested in acquiring this technology. Now, thanks to the UCSF Catalyst program, we've been able to focus on our prototypes and usability currently. And I'm excited to announce, as of this morning, we were granted breakthrough device designation by the FDA. We've submitted our work at different transplant conferences and been selected as a transplant visionary by the American Society of Transplantation. This is our next 2-year development platform. Our next big step is an FDA pre-sub meeting. We think this whole thing will cost approximately $400,000 just to get it to the clinical testing phase. And we'd like to use the money from today's event to focus on performance and safety testing and the manufacturing process development. The impact is there, the science is there. We're excited to make this device a reality and save lives with your support. Thanks to everyone who supported us so far. I'll turn it over to questions.
Thanks so much. So questions from our online judges.
I'll go first.
District Agent, can you go back to your results page for a sec?
You're talking about the chart?
Oh, no, yeah, you're just right there. I just wanted to just mentally check that. Applicability to other organ types. Is there any applicability to other organ types?
Yeah, in fact, we validated livers, kidneys, hearts, and lungs along this pathway. Cardiac, obviously, they spend a lot more money in that space, but there's different outcomes that we'll be targeting in each of those.
Mm-hmm. This is Denise Aarons, a follow-up question to that. How do you prioritize them, and are there any unique challenges to any of them?
Yeah, absolutely there are. First off, the liver is huge. So that one's probably going to go third or fourth on the list. The biggest impact that we can have after the kidney is going to be cardiac. Cardiac hearts only stay healthy for about 4 hours. So every minute counts even more in that space. So we'll be going to heart after that. And then it's a toss up between liver and lung. But there's a lot of engineering challenges and physiology challenges.
Chuka from Define Ventures, just building off of that piece, just curious from a product roadmap and from a commercialization standpoint, how you think about the timeline for moving into those additional use cases, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, that all depends on how quickly and how broadly we can build out the team. Our IP covers all of this. Now, the space is heating up and there's a lot of academic projects here, but no commercial devices in this space. We think it all needs to be done in the next 3 to 4 years as we broaden our team. But we have to start with one, and that's going to be kidney, because that's where we can have the biggest impact right now.
If there's time for one more question, I have one more. As it relates to your IP, it was 2 provisionals. Have you thought about the value of doing a track 1 on that to see if you can get some issued claims, which would increase the value of that IP pretty significantly?
Yeah, we're actually working with Stanford OTL right now, and we're filing this week on that. Friday.
Thank you so much.
Thanks all.
Really appreciate it. So now we're going to take a 2-minute pause as our IT team switches over. So now all of our presenters will be virtual and our judges will still mostly be virtual, but our audience will be here and I'll continue to help moderate. So for our online presenters, you'll receive a 1 minute left in the chat and then time's up in the chat as well. So moderate that for yourselves. Otherwise, I'll interject and turn to judges at that point. Okay. So next up is Capturedx, and we're ready to see your slides online if you can start sharing them.
Well, hello, my name is Jenny Jancy, co-founder and CEO of Capturedx. We're developing an AI-enabled ultrasound exam to aid in the diagnosis of injured children. Each year, 10 million children in the US have to go to the emergency room after an injury. Trauma is a leading killer of kids, and clinicians don't want to miss internal bleeding. But how can they be sure? More often than not, they turn to CT scans to give the diagnosis, even though very few need intervention. This is expensive, dangerous, and time-consuming. From the time the emergency doctor orders the exam to the radiologist's final report can be up to 24 hours. And 4,000 of these children each year will develop cancer directly caused by this ionizing radiation. That's why doctors have looked for alternatives. The FAST exam, a quick bedside ultrasound exam done in trauma, is standard in adults, but most doctors are not confident enough to use it in kids. That's where Capturedx comes in. We are developing machine learning algorithms that integrate into ultrasound exams. Our technology will give doctors the confidence to rapidly and accurately identify internal bleeding in injured children. Our software will provide real-time assistance for doctors in capturing the correct images, detecting internal bleeding, and automating the necessary documentation for medical records and billing. Current diagnostic strategies also include standard use of the clinical decision rule. This rule has increased the sensitivity over just using clinical suspicion, which often missed internal bleeding. However, the rule has low specificity, thus creating many unnecessary CT scans. When integrating the FAST exam with the clinical decision rule, it increases both the sensitivity and specificity, approaching the gold standard of CT. Capturedx has been working closely with leaders in the field to make this a reality. One of the main challenges of pediatric FAST is capturing the right images. We have created a machine learning algorithm with 98% accuracy in identifying the most important views for trauma. We will integrate this model into software that will guide doctors real time to capture and interpret the right images without extensive training. Our first priority next in development is to build a machine learning model to detect free fluid, which is a sign of bleeding. Free fluid can be seen here, collecting between the liver and the kidney. Our technology will aid every clinician to be able to quickly and confidently diagnose bleeding in their pediatric patients. As the US transitions to value-based healthcare, Reducing unnecessary CT scans and decreasing the turnaround time for treating a patient are of highest importance. With the Capturedx fast exam, the emergency clinician will immediately order, perform, and diagnose all trauma patients within minutes of arrival. This will shorten patients' hospital stay and improve their outcomes. Capturedx will also increase the revenue to a hospital for fast reimbursement. Through our ICOR customer discovery work and talking to billing departments, fast exams are routinely underbilled or not even billed at all. Capturedx can increase the billing and reimbursement for fast by achieving 3 steps in the process. It will ensure a complete exam, ensure correct interpretation, and automate the documentation and billing process. With the conservative assumption of 30% of trauma patients receiving a fast exam, this equates to almost $1 billion in revenue to hospitals for pediatric fast exams, and will generate almost $5 billion when we expand beyond our beachhead market of pediatrics into the adult population. Our regulatory path is still to be determined, but we'll pursue it either 510(k) or de novo. Caption Health was the first AI-guided ultrasound to be FDA approved and underwent the de novo process. Their technology exists with completing an ultrasound of the heart. However, the regulatory names and descriptions of their technology are generic in indication. Our next development steps are to create our free fluid classifier, basically to be able to say yes or no to internal bleeding. We start by having experts annotate UCSF real-world data of pediatric fast exams and develop the machine learning model with that data. We will then need to have basic software to integrate into current processes like Epic and also read out of the results. We will then validate the model and software with external data from other institutions. Thank you again for allowing us to share Capturedx as we seek to quickly and accurately diagnose injured children through artificial intelligence. Our UCSF-born innovation started with the unmet clinical need identified by Dr. Kornblith and Newton Addo's AI data science experience as a foundation for our solution. We'd also like to thank those organizations that have given advice, support, facilities, and funding for the progress we've made so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now to...
Hey, so Jenny, one point of, it's Paul Hooper, one point of clarification, one question. Clarification is, so the technology will guide in the capturing of the appropriate images and also the analysis of those images. It'll be 2 steps. Did I get that right?
Yes, you
got it. And then the other point you made in your write-up notes, you talk about an organization, Sonsonite, as being potentially interested in licensing this. Can you walk us a little bit through how that go-to-market may work?
Sure, yeah. And there are a few options. We hope to kind of get to this a little bit more doing some national ICOR work. But yes, so you have ultrasound, point of care ultrasound manufacturers that are really interested in integrating this into their own systems. And this has been seen, there's other, again, especially in the echocardiogram space, that they have licensed their technology to these manufacturers as a package to integrate for the product. That being said, we're looking. I mean, other companies in the echo space have done non-exclusive license deals. Others, recently, S2.ai has done an exclusive license with Echonos, which is actually founded from the previous founder of Sonosite. So there's that potential, but there's also the potential of having a standalone product that would be able to connect in to the system. So we're exploring all of our options as of right now.
Our online judges?
This is Denise Ahrens. Maybe I missed it, but can you cover your IP and what's protectable here?
Sure, yeah. As of right now, I mean, of course, we've made the invention disclosure to UCSF, and the Office of Technology and Management, but we have decided to keep it as a trade secret so far, as is usually done with AI algorithms. So of course, we'll go forward with any sort of software development is a different situation too later.
This is Avi. I have a question. What will it take for you to get to, because there's a strategy of, I refer to it as juicing the DRG, but basically moving the patient, from no comorbidities to comorbidities or multiple comorbidities. So, do you have a strategy or do you have a pathway to kind of get there? Because that's been incredibly successful for other companies that have, installed this sort of technology, and gone through. There's a 30% revenue haircut if you go into the Epic App Orchard. So you have to build in lots of other costs for all that integration, but you can get paid for it if you can move that billing up to that higher level for, you know, a lot of patients. I don't know, does that make sense what I'm trying to get at? Like,
Perhaps. I think I didn't understand what you're saying. I mean, yeah, we were surprised, honestly, to be honest, that, you know, John Muir and, you know, Walnut Creek doesn't even bill for fast exams because, you know, a lot of clinicians will come in and, you know, look quickly and not document it properly, you know, and there's no, you know, it can be a little bit. So, and therefore we're trying to make this an automated process where when they're looking and it's saying, bing, yes, this is green, this is the right image, and you capture that, archive that image, and then be able to, once you get all the necessary images, you know, that will be able to apply to a CPT code of a complete exam.
Thank you so much. I know those.
It's great. But it's epic. That's the hard part. So that's the
oh yeah. Okay. Oh yes, got it.
I know the question time goes by so quickly. So next up, we have our next company, and they are also online, and their name is Urine Control.
Hi guys, my name is Alex Arvelos. I'm a serial medical device entrepreneur and the CEO of Starling, where our mission is to revolutionize the management of patients with neurogenic bladder dysfunction. But first, I want you to imagine if you or a loved one lost the fundamental ability to pee on your own. Well, that's the reality. There were 3 million patients currently in the United States with a condition called neurogenic bladder management, and a part of it is about 200,000 children also affected by this condition. We know about it because one of our founders' younger sister was born with a condition called cerebral palsy that left her with a neurogenic bladder. And the issues right now is the methods that we use to manage these patients are frankly a little archaic. It involves these people to self-catheterize themselves or have a loved one self-catheterize them 5 to 8 times a day, every 3 to 4 hours, pretty much for the rest of their life. It's associated with a severe reduction in quality of life, but it's also associated with really significant urinary tract infections. And because often the insensate nature that comes with these patients' conditions, frequently they can't detect the early signs of them. And so frequently have to treat these patients in the hospital in an emergent setting because of a urinary tract infection that builds up to significant costs when you take all the catheters that these patients go through, as well as all these hospitalizations. And so at Starling, our mission is to give these patients a simpler, safer way to pee again at the press of a button, but also to improve the healthcare economics surrounding their hospitalization needs. And this is our solution. We call it the urine control system. It features this fully indwelling urinary prosthesis that allows these patients to pee once again at the press of a button. We're designing it as a monthly replace device, and we expect it to lower their base urinary tract infection rates compared to clean intermittent catheterization, but we're also developing it as a tech-enabled solution that can talk to their smartphone to let them know how full their bladder is so they can know when they need to use the bathroom, but as well as detect the early signs of the urinary tract infections. So we can treat these patients earlier in the outpatient setting versus the emergent inpatient setting. This is a quick animation of how the device works. It's inserted with the help of an insertion tool. Patients then simply either sit down on the toilet or nearby, activate the wand, which then allows the activation of the internal motor, which then allows the patients to pee at the press of the button. Then throughout the day, they'll talk to the device with their smartphone to learn how full the bladder is, so they can now make an educated decision about when they should use the bathroom. But also in the background, our AI software is learning the normal colonization of that patient's bladder, such that when we see significant changes with it with our mass spectroscopy-like sensors, it allows us to flag it early. And this is where our true back-end digital health platform comes in, because as we collate this data on a month-to-month basis, we now make it available to the urologist to enable new reimbursable revenues for them, to about $120 per patient per month. But by enabling the early detection of these pre-febrile UTIs, it offers significant cost savings to Medicare in the tune of about $22,000 in net savings per patient per year on our platform after taking account of the device. So far, we've had some great preclinical experience with the device. You can see this is our current integrated prototype. We recently did a human cadaver study at Houston Methodist Hospital, and we have an ongoing preclinical study right now with focusing on patients with neurogenic bladder dysfunctions. And so far, we've been able to demonstrate our AI accuracy to be able to, to tell the difference between colonization and a true UTI in this patient population. We recently met with the FDA to confirm our Class 2 pathway to get our device to market. And what we're thinking as a business model is we'll deliver our device directly to patients per month at the cost of about $400 per device, which then reimbursed under existing durable medical device equipment. But this allows to build up to a $15 billion annually reoccurring market. And in the process phase, we'll see no additional cost because the device actually costs less than current catheters that they're having to go through, and Medicare is already reimbursing. At our path to market, we're currently raising a $5 million seed that will allow us for completing of a processes development, as well as completing a first-in-man study, as well as the commercialization of our point-of-care diagnostic device that we've taken essentially the AI and spectral piece of the catheter and put into a point-of-care diagnostic that we think has significant early revenue potentials, as highlighted by our recent letter of intent with one of the largest private practice urology groups in Texas for an annual total enterprise contract value of about $144 million in annually recurring potential revenues. We expect to have the device cleared around 2023 before launching our urine control as a service in 2024. We've had tremendous support so far, including funding by the Y Combinator Accelerator and Spark Ventures, one of the top AI-focused venture VC funds in the country, as well as had a slew of non-dilutive funding from the NSF, as well as winning a host of business plan competitions around the country, and have great clinical study collaborators in both Stanford and the VA in Houston and San Antonio. Our team came together years ago because of our personal connection to the problem. We've seen the issues that the current standard of care has these patients, and we're dedicated to give these patients a better option so they stop having to catheter themselves every time they need to be, so they can stop having to worry about dying every time they have to go to pee from a significant urinary tract infection. We hope that you'll join us on our journey, so together one day we can tell all of our patients, with Starling, now you're in control of your health. Happy to answer any questions. Oh, sorry, I'm about 30 seconds over.
Alex, this is great presentation. Just one quick question. Could this be adapted for the incontinence market?
We do. We think the primary value proposition is with these neurogenic patient populations, but we totally see a secondary indication in the incontinence market, as well as patients with non-neurogenic bladder dysfunctions, or those as a replacement for temporary catheters, say either pre or post BPH procedures. So pretty much anyone who has issues peeing, we think our device could be used in long term.
Hey, Alex, this is Dan Burnett. I'm wondering if you've seen any issues with crystallization and issues obstructing the device in the electrode.
So one of our key trade secrets is the coding mechanism that we figured out to use that has showed pretty good resistance to crystallization and biofilm formation for the 30-day lifespan of the implant. If it was in there for more than 30 days, we might start having issues, but at least for the 30-day time span, we want it in there before it gets replaced out with a fresh device. So far, the data that we've seen has suggested we would be good.
We still have time for some questions if there are any.
This is Tejal Desai. Alex, can you tell a little bit more about the IP? I noticed there was a few words about the IP around value proposition, but in terms of the technology itself?
Yeah, so our IP comes in two families. The first family covers the core aspects of the prosthesis technology and how we enable the ability to do this longitudinal sensing of the urine over time, as well as the core aspects of how we enable the wireless communication without a battery between the implant and to the person's smartphone, as well as aspects of how we do the pumping aspect. That's probably not the strongest aspect of the IP because people have been developing catheter pumps for years, but at least protects the methods of how we do it, so we can't necessarily prevent someone else from developing another catheter pump down the years. But the core aspects that we think of our value prop is being able to prevent these hospitalizations from a UTI, because that is where the $22,000 swing to Medicare comes from. And we think we have a way to do that seamlessly without patients or having to do anything different with their lives.
Thank you.
We have time for one more quick question.
Yeah, Alex,
here. I have a question. Oh, go ahead. You go ahead. Go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, Chuka from Defined Ventures. On that piece around 22,000 net savings, would love to just get underneath some of the assumptions around that and how you guys are thinking about the ROI.
Yeah, so pretty much how it breaks down is, if you take into account of the current cost of catheters, it comes to about $6,000 per patient per year. But then with the UTI rate, and especially the hospitalization for those UTI rate in this patient population, the true cost of a neurogenic patient comes to around $32,000 per patient per year. With our device at our price point, it actually costs less than the current standard of care in terms of a disposable piece of it. But even when you take into account the extra cost from accounting for these remote patient monitoring revenues we're bringing to the urologist, by lowering the acuity of the UTI's treatment by moving to the outpatient setting, in addition to lowering the base rate, is where we have significant cost savings to the overall platform, where this 22,000 builds up to.
Great, and thank you so much for your presentation today.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here. Appreciate it, guys.
Next up, we have Elucicor.
Good afternoon. My name is Trey Welch. I'm the founder CEO of Traymedics, and we believe in filling the gap for congenital heart disease for patients with coarctation aorta with our patented bioabsorbable stent technology, Elucicor. Sorry, I don't know if it shows up. But these patients early on in life, they have to have open heart surgery, and thus later on will have a metal stent implanted to make them healthy. And we believe in advancing the treatment with our bioabsorbable stent technology. So coarctation of the aorta is a narrowing of the aorta where you have a stricture. So early on, as I said, if they don't have treatment, they can eventually have heart failure or death, or as they age, lead to aortic wall injury and aneurysms. But early on in life, they'll have surgery with grafting and then a stent implanted, and then eventually a follow-on procedure to force the stent to grow with the patient. Now, problems with metal stents when they implant them, they can be incorrectly positioned, they can have high tissue growth, you can have aortic wall injury leading to thrombosis as well as stent fracturing. Now, just imagine if you could have a minimal invasive surgery implanting Elucicor, our bioabsorbable stent, and over 5 years, we've shown that we do not have any of these positioning problems, vessel occlusion or thrombosis, leading with minimal scar tissue. Again, this is Elucicor. It's a bioabsorbable stent, opposing coil design with 2 platinum markers covered under 4 patents, 5th one pending. It is a balloon expandable stent, similar to metals. We were recently granted breakthrough device designation. The material is composed of the stent is polyalactide, much like sutures used in surgery. And as it degrades over time, it forms byproducts of CO2 and water. Now, our design is unique because we can actually scale it from 6 millimeters up to 14 millimeter, which is a size range for these pediatric patients under 1 year of age. So our competitive advantage is that, again, we are made of a bioabsorbable material, and we can have short-term anticoagulation therapy as well as achieve vessel growth over time once implanted in the patient, unlike our competitors that require redilatation procedures. Our global market is around the coarctation, 660,000 procedures. We estimate a $4 billion TAM. We think we could capture 20%. Our value proposition to physicians, they don't require any additional training. It is a minimal invasive procedure, which can help patients to have a 1-day surgery versus 10-day surgery for open heart surgery. They can also have MRI available to them. They also have a reduction in cost savings. Now, the regulatory pathway is a PMA process where you go through preclinical, submit an IDE, a pilot pivotal study, then get FDA clearance. So currently, we're at the point where we're meeting with a CRO to discuss human protocols and want to do a FDA pre-sub meeting in the fall, as well as getting the FDA payer program. Currently, to date, we've raised $730,000 from friends and family, and we're seeking seed money to get through our IDE submission. Again, our milestones are we had a prototype design freeze. We've done a long-term degradation study in animals. We've done a disease state pig model study with showing good results. We had breakthrough device designation. We incorporated the company. Again, we're trying to go start our IDE testing. Our team is Dr. Reddy, Dr. Forbes, Dr. Gulasarian, whom I worked with on this. Primarily, I worked with Dr. Reddy with FDA going through breakthrough device designation, setting up the company. And I have, again, my name is Trey Welch. I have 5 patents, over 20 publications, and I've worked in stents over 20 years. And Ron Plummer is a project manager. Potential collaborators and choirs currently right now, I have some collaboration with Ann Lurie Children's Hospital, with Dr. Nugent, Boston Scientific NewMed, or Cook's Medical could be acquired the technology. And again, Traymedics, our vision is to advance treatment for coarctation aorta with the Elucicor to make these sick babies healthy babies. Thank you. You have any questions?
Thank you so much. To our online judges.
I have one question for clarification. This is Denise. Can you explain the current treatment paradigm? You said it was a surgery plus a stent, and so how does that work? And are you completely eliminating the surgery?
Correct. So, yeah, current treatment is they do a grafting procedure for the coarctation, and then what will happen is they'll have recoarctation occur. So they'll implant a metal stent in a percent of those cases. But what we're proposing is we eliminate the surgery and do a minimal invasive surgery with this stent.
Hi, this is Tejal Desai from UCSF. I just had a question about, you mentioned you did the, I guess, a 5-year degradation study.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? And also, do you see any issues with buildup of PLA, PLGA within the vascular system?
Yeah,
Similar drug-eluting stents.
Correct. So no, what we do is we found we got good tissue or stent apposition to the arterial wall, such that we had good tissue coverage within 2 to 3 months of implantation, and then as it degraded over time, we saw the stent actually degrade within the arterial wall. It didn't come out and create what you call late stent thrombosis or travel downstream. It just stayed within the arterial wall. We just had minimal scar tissue formation at some region of the stent.
We still have time for about one more question.
How long is Aviroop here? How long do you need to kind of effectively nurse these kids through these growing periods? I mean, is it a one and done? Will you go back and put another one in then a year? What do you think about for that?
So we think, based off our growth model pig studies we did with the coarctation, that we showed it actually growed at 1 year. Let's put it down here.
So yeah,
we showed actual growth. So what
you just got to get it through a critical period.
Correct. So what we think is you could just put one in, and we don't think you would need to do another operation. But if it does require it, you could still go back and do that. You could either implant another stent, or you could do angioplasty.
And have you thought about one that's retrievable? I mean, let's say it really maybe only needs to be in for 6 months to 9 months. Could you have a backup plan that's a $9 stainless steel version that you could try to pull out? It's got some coating on it so it doesn't ingrow too quickly. Just a thought. I mean, at the same time, PLA and PLLA are used in angioseal all the time in the femoral artery, and there's millions of those things put in per year. So I think those are pretty safe materials, but yeah, you got a long road. I guess. I'm just curious. You don't have to answer that now. I could follow up with you later.
Okay, I'll probably follow up with you later.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Hi, this is Jamie Phillips. Just a quick question. Is this device MRI compatible, or have there been any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so in our pig studies, we actually did run MRI on it, and it is MRI compatible. In short, to answer your question.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We are moving right along, so thank you to everyone who's making this so efficient. We have our next company up, and it is called Pediatric, and we'll hear from them now.
Well, this is going to sound familiar to everyone here. My name is Tim Moran. I'm the founder and CEO of Pediastent, which is developing the Cardia-ZN. And I want to mention that I have personal motivation for pediatric devices. My daughter Ellie was born 2.5 months premature and spent 3 weeks in the NICU. So I've seen these device limitations from a parent's perspective. So according to 68 pediatric cardiologists who participated in the study that I conducted a while back, a bioresorbable stent for pulmonary artery stenosis and aortic coarctation is far and away the biggest device need in their field. And both those indications are congenital narrowing of a vessel, as you can see here in this image. So currently, these indications are treated 1 in 3 ways: open heart surgery, which is high risk, high cost, long recovery time, and as many as 30% of those patients will require an additional surgery at some point in their life. Balloon angioplasty is not sufficient by itself. For those patients who can receive metal stents, they will face a 100% revision rate because those stents will have to be continually expanded to match the somatic growth of their vessels. And currently, there are no stent options for neonates because of size restrictions. So the ideal solution is a bioresorbable stent, one that opens up that vessel, provides support as that vessel heals, and then safely dissolves away without the need for further intervention. And you can see why it's on the top of the cardiologist list. It improves outcomes, lowers risk, lowers costs for payers, improves patient access, and shortens recovery time. So Pediastent has looked in this space for over 12 years. We started with polymers, but they look good in pigs and bench tests, but based on some case studies, there was really high inflammation in infants when we moved away from there. Magnesium degraded too quickly, so we quickly realized that zinc was the ideal solution here. It's required as a dietary element, it's naturally anti-inflammatory, and it has great mechanical performance. So there have been over 100 papers written about zinc alloys in the last 10 years, so why haven't we seen a zinc stent until now? Well, zinc in elemental form is too soft. It needs to be combined with something else. The problem is that small changes in alloy elements, the ratio of those elements or the processing techniques to get it into stent form has a big impact on mechanical performance, biocompatibility, and degradation rate. So anytime you change any of those elements, you're not only redoing bench testing, you're conducting a long and expensive in vivo study once again. So we spent over the last 5 years working with some of the best metallurgists in the world to figure out what the right combination is in a zinc alloy. And we think we found it. The Cardia ZN features the same radial strength as metal stents. It has the right degradation rate for pediatrics, and all the elements are safe and biocompatible. The project is supported by a $3.5 million grant from the NIH, on which I'm the PI. I do want to mention Boston Scientific has provided an awful lot of pro bono engineering, quality, and regulatory assistance and continues to do so. Boston will also be providing the delivery system for the commercial product. So here's what the degradation product looks like. In the first image, you can see that the vessel is being supported by a fully intact stent. At 6 months, you can see some fracturing. By 12 months, that stent is fully fractured, and that's actually a good thing. That means that the vessel is allowed to grow as it's intended. Here's that same pig study in an angiogram. The image on the left is immediately after 2 Cardia ZNs were implanted. The image on the right is 12 months later, where you can see the vessel's not only grown, but there's great aortic patency through there, which is exactly what we wanted to see. So I asked the same cardiologist, if you had a stent that worked exactly the way you wanted it to, how many would you use per year? And through some extrapolation, I got to the number of about 6,000 units in the US. Now, there is a metal stent on label that sells for about $6,000, and we assume that this would be the minimum price point that we could charge. Obviously, we'd look for some premium for the bioresorbable aspect of it. Currently, there is coding for stenting for these indications, so we would just use this, possibly with an add-on payment if required. So getting pediatric devices to market is a huge challenge, and luckily I run a sister company called Pediavascular, which sells angiography devices into the same call points and has for the last 10 years. So we distribute direct in the United States and count all but 2 pediatric cath labs as current customers. International sales is being channeled through distributors in 24 countries. And once the Cardia ZN were ready, we'd simply plug it into this channel. So currently we're conducting a GLP pig study. This is after 3 meetings with the FDA, and our supply chain is validated. The design is finalized, packaging and sterilization have also been validated. After consulting with 3 patent attorneys and an ex-patent examiner, we see that the freedom to operate for this product is wide open. We're looking for an early feasibility study of 40 to 50 patients that lead to a PMA in late 2023. We're looking to raise about $300,000 to $500,000 to reach the commercial launch. I mentioned this product is supported by a very experienced team of cardiologists who all have served as PIs on human clinical trials and have all developed their own pediatric medical devices. And finally, I wanted to leave you with this image. This is what the current state looks like and how we hope the Cardia ZN would change it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Paul Hooper, quick question for you. Yep. Is your initial focus, and by the way, great presentation, is your initial focus going to be pediatric, or do you see yourself diversifying very quickly into the adult market as well?
Yeah, we're focused primarily on the pediatric market. There are indications based on the size and the structure that could easily be translated into peripheral and adult, such as the SFA, but that's not a primary focus for us right now. We're just pediatrics.
Got it. Thanks.
And our online judges.
Yeah, this is Dan Burnett. You mentioned a PMA in 2023. Does that mean you'll be starting the PMA study or submitting the PMA then? Because it seems like this study would require some meaningful follow-up after you started.
Yeah. So what we've discussed with the FDA is that we would start a PMA study, an early feasibility study, in late 2023. Based on the results of that, we could transition into a PMA. The requirement that would be that there would be a post-market surveillance.
Okay, great.
So this is Denise Aaron. You're suggesting that you're going to be able to get a PMA clearance for an implantable device in a pediatric patient with 20 to 40 patients?
Yes, as long as we have post-market surveillance.
That's shocking.
It's impressive. We were surprised by this too, but that's not signed on the dotted line, but those are the discussions we've had with the FDA so far in our pre-sub meetings.
Avi Roop here. Have you thought about splitting this into two companies where you have, I'd call it the alloy manufacturing company that holds that part of the assets, and then the pediatric application company? Because it sounds like you're kind of working on two different things.
No, I don't really see the difference in the value of doing that. Can you explain more what you had in mind?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I guess to be very direct, Dr. Rand, great presentation. I think there's the pediatric application, which is what you're focused on. There are also potentially lots of applications for a new resorbable stent technology, or resorbable metal overall, right? It has lots of other applications. And
I see.
In a sense, you could. I think it would present as cleaner if you would say, okay, this is the budget for the pediatric application. We're setting up this company that makes the alloy. We're going to do the biocompatibility testing. We're going to build assets that support the file with the FDA with respect to that material usage, and that has other applications. It would just sort of kind of separate the two. I think this is phenomenal. What you're working on. However, there is, I just wouldn't want you to come off as that we're raising money for pediatrics, but we're also building this whole other alloy, which has probably phenomenal commercial value. So that's my point there. It seems cleaner if you split them. That's just my
I see what you mean. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely an option. I think we'd want to get a little farther down the line to make sure it actually is working the way we'd want it to, but clearly that could be an option that we could pursue for sure.
Okay, so we have our final presentation, and that is Smiley Scope.
Perfect. Hello, and everyone. Thanks so much for having us today. I will switch over to my slides. So hello and thank you. I'm Evelyn Chan, CEO of Smiley Scope. I'm a pediatric doctor with experience in public health and digital transformations. I co-founded Smiley Scope because I wanted to reduce pain and anxiety for my patients in an innovative, drug-free way. I'm joined today by Gavin West, my VP of Sales, who brings operational experience from the Marine Corps and sales and marketing experience from leading medical device companies. We have a suite of products, but today I want to focus on our latest addition, which is for MRI. So nearly 40 million MRI scans are performed in the US each year. For an MRI, a patient needs to lie perfectly still in a claustrophobic environment that is very noisy, up to 60 minutes. MRIs are anxiety-provoking. 40% of children are sedated, which doubles the patient's average MRI visit duration from 2 hours to 4 to 5 hours, and visit costs are 10 times higher than awake patients. And 5% of adults prematurely terminate their scan, resulting in aborted and non-diagnostic scans, reduced MRI revenue, and unnecessary exposure to anesthesia. Existing solutions are wide-board scans and beautifully decorated MRI rooms, but both are still noisy and cause anxiety for many patients. And mock MRIs, which don't have a magnet in them, it takes up a whole room of hospital real estate and takes away from the billing potential of an operational MRI scanner. It's also challenging as hospital educational visits have been reduced during the pandemic. We felt that a virtual reality experience could be highly effective to show patients what it feels like to have an MRI. VR creates an immersive, interactive 3D environment, which results in significantly reduced pain and anxiety and 10% higher memory recall than 2D or flat screens, shown in functional MRI and clinical trials.
We developed a VR MRI simulation. It doesn't go in the MRI scanner, it's for preparation before the procedure. So the patient dons the VR headset, is exposed to the sights and sounds of the MRI machine, and the VR tracks head movement and is able to provide a quantifiable assessment of the patient's ability to stay still during that virtual scan. We have a gamified experience so patients can reimagine it as a noisy donut making factory, so they have to stay still to stack donuts, or a space adventure where they need to stay still to steer a spaceship. So this lets patients know what to expect from an MRI before they get into the machine. It reduces unnecessary anesthesia and sedation and results in better images. It's also used as a triage tool to identify which patients can successfully have an awake scan or be coachable for an awake scan or need sedation through scoring head movement. Shifting a proportion of patients from sedated to awake increases clinical workflow efficiencies and has huge impacts on optimizing scanner time. Results from Boston Children's medical imaging have been highly positive. Consistently, 9 out of 10 patients, parents, and healthcare practitioners love using SmileyScope. We deliver significant savings. Through our VR simulation and IV cannulation pain reduction products, we can reduce sedation by 16%. Based on conservative CMS reimbursement rates, we can save $450,000 per year per MRI tube through reductions in time, sedation, resequencing, and aborted scans. SmileyScope is sold as a B2B subscription as an integrated hardware-software unit to healthcare providers. It's the world's only medical-grade VR headset. It's easy to use, fully wipeable, and 5 times faster than off-the-shelf VR headsets. From a regulatory perspective, we can sell under the MMA or Mobile Medical Application Framework, but have just been accepted into the FDA's Safer Technologies program for our needle product as a safer alternative to opioids, sedation, and reducing pain and anxiety. We're currently in MRI clinical trials. Once we demonstrate efficacy and regulatory approval as a Class 2 software as a medical device, we plan to get reimbursed as a neuropsychological test, which determines the probability of a patient being able to complete a high-quality MRI scan. And that means that the hospital gets reimbursement for using our product. We've been highly capital efficient to date. With only seed funding, we have deployed and developed over 25 VR experiences, which are rapidly becoming standard of care for drug-free pain and anxiety management in acute care settings. It's becoming a platform for evidence-based digital therapies, from alleviating pain during needle procedures through to MRI reduction, pain reduction and anxiety reduction, and curated content. So we recently onboarded Sir David Attenborough's Forest of Serenity, which has 4 randomized controlled trials for adult pain management. We have VR experiences that are used for a wide range of applications throughout the hospital. So in summary, SmileyScope is a really innovative product and it benefits all stakeholders. So it reduces clinical costs and patient experience and clinical workflow. And I'll stop there for questions. Thank you so much.
So, Paul Hooper, quick question. Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned in your write-up, you say that the hardware and software is a 2-month break even. Did I get that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so thereon after, it's only just straight revenue coming into profit coming into the organization.
Yeah, largely. We continue to provide software and services and updates, but yes, it is largely.
And then final question is, how do you maintain this market? What's your moat around the market? Why isn't somebody else come into the market with their own software for a VR headset?
So we have multiple different moats. So I think the first thing is that we have that clinical understanding to really understand what the problems are and what our priorities are. So for us, it was about how do we create a really meaningful experience that is easy for an operator or a clinician to use and for a patient to get benefit. We have the world's only medical grade VR headset. So in acute care settings, this is the only one that's safe from an infection control perspective. We have patents on how we reframe and create those libraries to actually recreate what happens in VR and how it mimics or reduces that, pain or anxiety reduction in the VR experience. And of course, clinical trials take a couple of years. So we have already had a pivotal clinical trial in needle experiences, and we're also developing a suite of clinical trials
And now we're in 100% of Australian children's hospitals and a number of leading US hospitals as well. So I think that increases commercial moat.
Okay, thanks, Evelyn.
I have a follow-up question to that. This is Denise. So given the more ubiquitous availability of VR units at home and whatnot, do you see a possibility where a lot of this training could be done at home versus having to go into a clinic with people's own VR units?
That's definitely a potential for future as well. It's a great one that we're looking into some outpatient applications, particularly in the pain space.
Hi, this is Dan Burnett. In some of your images, it looks like it's worn on the face, and in that last image, it looks like it's outside of the coil. That the case, and is that because it's not MRI? It distorts the MRI image. I'm assuming it's MRI compatible. It's got to be, right?
So actually, it's a preparation before the MRI, so it isn't MRI compatible. So this is just an image. The last image was just a patient who'd had a good experience after their simulation. So it's worn outside. It can be used in the waiting room or in a separate room, or often in the emergency department where the child needs to be sort of checked and exposed to that before they go into the MRI scanner.
Okay, so it's not actually in the coil.
That's correct. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, happy to hop in, Chuka from the Fund Ventures. Thanks, Evelyn. I think just curious, it seems like you mentioned a few use case with one being prior to the MRI screening. Is that the primary one that folks are using it for, or are there other use cases that are getting similar traction initially?
Yeah, so our flagship product is actually in IV cannulation. So what we did was we did our pivotal randomized control trials looking at children in the emergency department and outpatient phlebotomy for venous procedures. And we found 60% reduction in pain, 40% in anxiety, and half the need to restrain patients, which was very unique to our product. And so that was really the initial product, which has then led on to a number of applications throughout the hospital to reduce pain during needle procedures and anxiety during things like MRI.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. And we truly want to thank all of our presenters. That concludes our pitch competition for the day. 10 amazing companies as always. I'm always blown away with the attention to pediatric devices, the thoughtfulness around it, and being able to include maternal and fetal devices as well has been really special this year. So thank you to our competitors, and thank you especially to our judges, both in person and virtual. This worked out a lot better than I thought it was going to. So thank you so much to our IT group as well. And I hope you've enjoyed it from home. So we are going to take a small break for lunch. We hope you have lunch at home, and we're going to have lunch here until 1:10 when we'll be back with another panel. And our judges will break, and they will put together the scores, and we will come back and announce the winners at 3:25 this afternoon. So please join back in, and everyone is welcome to stay. I don't know if you had other remarks.
Just a big thanks to Janine for running the competition. Keeping us on time for the first time ever. Absolutely amazing. I hope you all are as impressed as I am. Each year, I think the quality of these companies and the talented people working on it just get better and better. We had almost, we had over 50 applications this year. You saw the cream of the crop today, but I hope you share my optimism that the future of pediatric health technology, maternal fetal, is very strong. So thank you, Janine. And a quick note to the judges, we have a separate link that you should have. It's both been emailed to you as well as a calendar invite. So we'll get together for deliberations. Let's do that at 12:30. Just give you a few minutes to get take a little break, and then we'll get together on that at 12:30. Please join the rest of the afternoon, and we'll be back for those announcements later today.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Janine.
Guys.
All right, we're going to welcome back Dr. Leonard, the chairperson of Pediatrics, chair of Pediatrics, to make some remarks on the pitch competition, and then we're going to announce our winners. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, thank you. I'll keep it brief because I'm sure everyone's on pins and needles. I just want to thank the judges, many whom I see here, Janine, and I want to thank you for moderating it, and really, James, to you and Janine for putting together this really exciting presentation. And I'm sure it was great. And I'm sorry that I wasn't able to catch all of it, but really eager to hear the outcomes of the pitch competition. So with that, I think I'll let you take it from here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So, you know, everyone who competed was absolutely fantastic. As we talked about, we had over 50 applications, really competitive process just to get to the pitch competition. We wish we could fund everybody, but we can't. We do have $375,000 in funding for today that we will announce. That comes from a combination of 3 sources currently, and anybody who has additional sources that wants to suggest them to us, we're willing to give out more money. But right now, the Food and Drug Administration Office of Orphan Devices, Orphan Products, excuse me, is a grant that we have that funds this work. The Frederick Gardner Cottrell Foundation out of Tucson, Arizona, funds this work, and a generous gift from the Hooper family as well. So thank you to those groups for making this possible. We're going to announce, and for those who don't get a cash award today or a monetary award, you are part of the PDC, and we do offer ongoing support, mentorship, and other resources throughout the year. So again, absolute kudos to everybody who presented. These are outstanding, outstanding projects. So without further ado, we have a bronze category, which is $25,000 in funding. That's going to go to 4 of the groups that presented today. Starting with 2 of the online groups, Elucicor and CardiaZN, 2 stent companies. We're starting a battle to see who can get to patients first. It's a small amount of seed funding, but both are very promising technologies. And thank you all. Congratulations on being bronze award winners. And in person, Neurical AI and Cymox, also winners of the bronze award. You guys come on up for those of you who are in person. And we'll do some pictures at the end if you guys don't mind. So we'll do the announcements for now, and then we'll do pictures with everyone at the end. Fantastic. So for the silver awards, we have 2 of those. Those are for $50,000 in funding. One of those goes to Vortex, and the other goes to Diatrio, which I think I said that right? Diatro. Congratulations. The kidney and the bladder are in the silver category. Thank you all. Next is the gold category, which is $75,000 in funding. That's a single award that goes online to urine control. Congratulations. And finally, the Platinum Award, which is $100K in funding, which does go in person to our first maternal project that's been the grand prize winner, Lumera and Radiant Oximetry. Congratulations. So I'd love really to wrap up by, again, just a huge round of applause for all the participants, the amount of talent, effort, and work that goes into each one of these projects. The dedication of these entrepreneurs and teams is just amazing. And, you know, we see the quality of the projects improving every year, and really just can't wait to see what these teams go out and do in the world and make an impact in our patients. Thank you for doing that. And thank you everyone for showing up today. Thank you to the entire team. It's been a great year. I can't wait for my favorite day next year. Hope to have you all back. Thank you very much.